Story 1. In one big town lived two poor children. Their names were Kay and Gerda, and they had a large garden full of roses. They were not brother and sister, but they loved each other very much. "Can the Snow Queen come in here?" asked the girl one day. "Only let her try," said the boy. "I'll put her on the stove and she'll melt." One evening when little Kay was at home, he climbed on a chair and looked out the window. One of the snowflakes was larger than the others, and it became larger and larger till at last it became the figure of a woman dressed in a long white dress. Her dress was made of a million little flakes. She was beautiful but made of ice, and her eyes were made of ice too, and were shining like bright stars. She nodded towards the window and waved her hand. The little boy got afraid and ran from the window. Then spring came and the children were again in the garden. Kay and Gerda held each other by the hand and kissed the roses. One day Kay and Gerda sat looking at the pictures of animals and birds in a big book. Suddenly Kay cried out, "Oh, there is something in my heart. I feel such a pain." And soon after that he said, "There is something in my eye." Gerda put her arm round his neck and looked into his eye, but she didn't see anything. "I think it is gone," he said. But it was not gone. It was one of the beads of the magic mirror which made everything beautiful and kind seem ugly and evil. Poor little Kay also received a small piece of that mirror in his heart, which very quickly became a piece of ice and became his heart cold and evil. "Why are you crying?" said he. "It makes your face ugly." "Oh, see!" he cried suddenly. "Their roses are ugly," and he pulled off some roses. When Kay saw that Gerda got frightened, he laughed and ran away from her. After the time his games became evil and even cruel. It was a bit of glass in his eyes and a piece of ice in his heart that made him like this. He was even cruel to Gerda, who loved him with all her heart. One day when he was playing in a big square, he saw a very large sledge. It was white, and in it sat a woman in white fur coat and a white cap. The sledge drove round the square, and when it went away, Kay's little sledge followed it. Kay cried out loudly, but nobody heard him. When the snow fell upon him and the sledge drove on and on. Suddenly the large sledge stopped and the person in it stood up. The fur and the cap, which were made of snow, fell off, and he saw a lady tall and white. It was the Snow Queen. She seated Kay in her sledge and kissed him. The kiss was colder than ice. It went to his heart. Kay felt as if he was dying, but only for a moment. Soon he felt quite well again and didn't notice the cold around him. "Now I mustn't give you more kisses," said the Snow Queen, "or I can kiss you to death." Kay looked at her and saw that she was very beautiful. She smiled to him all the time and flew higher and higher with him upon a black cloud. They flew over woods and lakes, over seas and lands. Below them the wolves howled and the wind roared. Above them the full moon was shining. And so Kay spent the long winter night, and in the morning he slept at the foot of the Snow Queen. Story 2. Gerda didn't know anything about Kay. What could happen to him? Some boys told her that his sledge followed a very large sledge which drove out of the town gate, but nobody knew where it went, and Gerda cried for a long time. She thought that he was drowned in the river which ran near the school, but she wasn't sure. One day in spring she decided to go down to the river and ask for it for Kay. It was an early morning when she kissed her old grandmother, who was still asleep, but on her red shoes, and went alone out of the town gates towards the river. "Is it true that you took my little friend away from me?" she asked the river. "I'll give you my red shoes if you give me back to me." Then she took off her new red shoes, when she liked very much, and threw them into the river, but they fell near the bank. Gerda thought that she threw the shoes not far enough, so she crept into a boat that lay on the water and threw the shoes again from the further end of the boat. The boat was not tight, and it began to drift away from the bank faster and faster. Little Gerda got very much afraid and began to cry, but not only birds could hear her, and they could not carry her to the land. These birds were flying by the shore and singing, "Here we are, here we are." Gerda sat still, with only her stockings on her feet. The red shoes floated after her, but she could not get them. The banks on the river were very nice. There were beautiful flowers on them, old trees and fields in which cows and sheep were grazing, but no people were seen. "Perhaps the river will carry me to little Kay," thought Gerda. So she lifted her head and looked at the beautiful green banks. And so the boat sailed on and on for many hours. At last Gerda came up to the large garden in which stood a small red house with strange red and blue windows. Outside its door stood two wooden soldiers. Gerda called out to them because she thought they were alive, but of course they didn't answer. Then Gerda called louder, and out of the house came a very old woman. She wore a large hat with painted roses on it to shade her from the sun. "Oh, you poor little child," said the old woman, and then she walked into the water, drew the boat up to the land with a stick, and helped Gerda to come out. The girl was happy to feel herself on dry ground, though she was afraid of the strange old woman. "Come and tell me who you are," said the old woman, "and how you came here." Gerda told her everything, and then she finished. The old woman asked her not to be unhappy, but to taste cherries from her garden and look at the flowers. She took Gerda by the hand and led her into the little house. On the table stood red cherries, and Gerda could eat as many as she wished. Then the old woman combed the girl's hair with a gold comb and said, "Stay with me and see how happily we shall live together. And while she was combing little Gerda's hair, the girl thought less and less about Kay, because the old woman was a witch, but not an evil witch. She used magic only a little because she wanted to keep Gerda with her. Then she took Gerda into the flower garden. How beautiful it is! It was. No picture book could have more beautiful colors. Gerda felt happy, and she played till the sun went down behind the tall cherry trees. The next day, and for many days after that, the girl played with the flowers in the warm sunshine, but she saw no roses there because the witch touched all the roses with her magic stick, and they disappeared under the earth. The old woman was afraid that the roses could remind Gerda of the roses and her home, and of little Kay, and she will run away. Story 3. One day the old woman sat in her armchair at the house door, wearing the hat with painted roses on it. Gerda looked at her hat and for the first time noticed the painted roses and thought of the beautiful roses in her garden. "Why are there no roses here?" thought Gerda, and she ran out into the garden and examined all the flowers beds, but she found no one rose. She sat down on the ground and wept, and her warm tears fell on the place where one of the rose trees was before. The rose tree came out at once. Gerda kissed the rose tree and asked it, "Do you know where Kay is? Do you think he is dead?" And the rose answered, "No, he is not dead. We were in the ground where all the dead lie, but Kay isn't there." "Thank you," said little Gerda, and she ran to the other end of the garden. She opened the door and ran out with bare feet into the wide world. Nobody followed her, and she ran and ran until she got tired and sat down on the big stone. When she looked around, she saw that the summer was over and there was late autumn. She knew nothing of this in the beautiful garden where the sun shone all the year round. "Oh, how much time I have wasted," said the Gerda. "It's autumn already. I mustn't rest any longer." And she stood up to work on, but her feet were cold and it was so dark around. She sat down to rest again and saw a big crow. The crow stood looking at her for some time and then said, "Go, go, go, good day." And then she asked the little girl where she was going alone. Gerda told the crow the whole story of her adventures and asked, "Do you know anything about little Kay?" The crow nodded his head and said, "Perhaps I do. I think I saw him near them a prince's castle, but he was forgetting you were the princess." "Does he love with a princess?" asked Gerda. The crow told her what he knew. "In the kingdom where we are now," said he, "there lives a princess who is wonderfully clever. A short time ago she decided to get married, but she wanted to find a husband who was very clever too. Many handsome young men came to the castle, but she liked only one of them. It was a boy with a clear, sparkling eyes and long hair." "What was Kay?" cried Gerda happily. "He was so clever. Oh, I have found him. and she clapped her hands. Can you take me to the castle? It's very easy to ask that, replied the crow, but how can we do it? I must tell you that it will be very difficult for little girl to get permission to enter the palace, but I'll try to help you. Wait for me here, and I flew away. Story 4. It was a late evening when the crow returned. Caw, caw, he said, it's not possible for you to enter the palace by the front entrance. The guards in civil uniforms will not allow it. But don't cry. My girlfriend who works in the palace knows a little back staircase that leads to the prince's bedroom. The crow led Gerda to the castle and then showed her the way to the back door. Oh, how little girl's heart beat! It was Big K, she thought, with those sparkling eyes and long hair. He will certainly be glad to see me and to know how unhappy I was that he didn't come back. Oh, what joy and fear she felt! They were now on the stairs, and there stood the crow's girl's friend with a key. My friend told me your story, said the crow. It's very touching. Take the lamp and follow me. We'll meet no one. They walked through many halls, and it seems together that on the walls there were shadows of horses, hunters, and ladies and gentlemen on horseback. At last they reached the bedroom. In the center of it there were two beds. Each of them was like a lily hung from the gold stem. One on which the princess lay was white and the other was red, and in it Gerda hoped to find little Kay. She came up to the bed, pushed one of the red leaves aside, and saw a little brown neck. Oh, that must be Kay. She called his name one quite loudly and held the lamp over him. A boy woke and turned his head. It was not little Kay. Then the princess looked out of her white lily bed and asked that was the matter. Little Gerda began to cry and told her story. You poor child, said the prince and the princess. They said they were not angry at the crows, but it must not happen again. The following day Gerda was dressed from head to foot in silk and velvet. The prince and the princess asked her to stay to the palace for a few days, but she only asked for a pair of warm boots and a little coach with a horse to draw it, and she received not only boots but also a fur coat and a muff. And at the door she found a carriage made of gold and a coachman wearing a gold crown on his head. In the coach there was a big box with sweet cakes, fruit and nuts. Farewell, farewell, cried the princess and prince and princess, and Gerda wept, and the crows wept too. Then they flew to a tree and flapped their wings as long as they could see the coach. Story 5. The coach drove on through a thick forest where some robbers stopped it. It is gold, it is gold, cried they, rushing forward and seizing their horses. Then they killed the coachman and pulled little Gerda out of the carriage. She's fat and pretty, said the old robber woman, who had a long beard and thick eyebrows. how tasty she will be. Yeah, and saying this, she took out a long, horrible knife. Oh, screamed she suddenly when her daughter bit her in the ear. She was a white girl, and her mother turned to her and had no time to kill Gerda. She will play with me, said the little robber girl. She will give me her pretty coat and muff and sweep with me in the bed, snip, snap, snare. And then she bit her mother in other ear, and her mother screamed again, and all the robbers began to laugh. I will have a ride in a coach, said the little robber girl, and she and Gerda sat down in the coach and drove away into the forest. The little robber girl was about as tall as Gerda, but stronger. She had broader shoulders and a darker skin. Her eyes were quite black. She kissed Gerda and said, "They won't kill you as long as I defend you. I think you are a princess." "No," said Gerda. And then she told the robber girl her story and how she was found a little cake. The robber girl nodded her head and said, "Nobody will kill you, because if I get angry with you, I'll kill you myself." Snip, snap, snare. The coach stopped in the courtyard of the robber's house. Two terrible bulldogs were jumping about, but they were not allowed to bark and bite. "You will sleep with me and my animals tonight," said the robber girl after they had something to eat and drink. So she took Gerda to the corner of the big hall where some straw carpets were laid down. About them there were more than 100 pigeons. "They all belong to me," said the robber girl, and she seized the nearest pigeon, held it by the feet, and shook it till it flapped its wings. "And here is my old friend Bear," and she pulled out a reindeer by its horn. Then she drew a long knife from the wall and touched the reindeer's neck with it. The poor animal began to kick, and the little robber girl laughed and pulled down Gerda on the straw carpets with her. "Will you keep this knife with you while you are asleep?" asked Gerda, looking at it with horror. "I always sleep with a knife by me," said the little robber girl. "No one knows what may happen. But now tell me again about Kate." She put one arm across Gerda's neck and held the knife in the other. Soon she was fast asleep, but Gerda couldn't close her eyes. She didn't know if she will live or die. The robbers sat round the fire, singing and drinking. Story 6. Then the pigeon said, "Caw, caw, caw, we saw little Kay. He sat in the carriage of the Snow Queen, which drove through the wood while we were lying in our nest. She blew upon us and all the young birds died except us two. Coo, coo." "Oh, what are you saying here?" cried the robber girl. "Do you know where the Snow Queen was going?" "She was going to Lapland, where there is always snow and ice," asked the reindeer. "Yes, there is always snow and ice there," said the reindeer, "and it is a wonderful place. You can run freely on the sparkling ice. The Snow Queen has her summer cottage there, but her palace is at the North Pole. Do you know where Lapland is? Asked the robber girl. Who can know better than I, said the reindeer. I was born and brought up there and ran to the snow-covered plains. At noon, when all the robbers went away and only the robber girl mother stayed at home, but she was drunk and was fast asleep, the little robber girl went up to the reindeer and said, I'll let you free and you'll run away to Lapland, but you must carry this little girl to the place of the Snow Queen where her friend is. The reindeer laughed for joy, and the robber girl lifted Gerda on his back and even gave her a cushion to sit on. Here you are fur boots and your coat, she said, because it will be very cold, but I'll keep your muff, it is so pretty. But I'll give you my mother's large warm mittens. Let me put them on your hands, and here are 2 loaves of bread and a ham, so you won't be hungry. And with these words she opened the door and cut the rope with which the reindeer was tied with her knife. Now run and take good care of this girl, she told the reindeer. And Gerda stretched out her hand in the big mitten toward the robber girl and said, Farewell, farewell, said the robber girl. Snip, snap, snare, and away flew the reindeer through the big forest as fast as she could. The wolves howled around them, and in the sky there were the red lights like the flame fire. These are my old northern lights, said the reindeer, and he ran day and night, faster and faster, till the last they reached Lapland. Story 7. They stopped a little hut. There was nobody at home except an old Lapland woman who was cooking fish. The reindeer told her Gerda's story. Oh, you poor thing, said the Lapland woman, you have a long way to go yet. You must travel more than 100 miles to find land. The Snow Queen lives there now, and she burns Bengal lights every evening. I'll write a few words on the dry fish, as I have no paper, and you can take it from me to the fine land woman who lives there. She can give you more information than I can. So when Gerda got warmed and had something to eat and drink, the woman wrote a few words on a dried fish and then tied Gerda on the reindeer. After sometimes they reached fine land and knocked at the fine land woman's hut. It was so hot inside that the woman wore almost no clothes. She took off Gerda's fur boots and the mittens and put a piece of ice on the reindeer heads. After she read what was written on the dried fish 3 times, she put the fish into her soup, as she knew it was good to eat. You are so powerful, said the reindeer. I know you can tie all the winds in the world with a piece of rope. Can you give this little girl such power that she will defeat the Snow Queen? I cannot give greater power than she already has, answered the woman. Don't you see how strong she is? Now men and animals help her, and how well she works through the world. Here, her power is in her kindness and love for her friend. She must defeat the Snow Queen herself and remove the beads of the magic glass from his eye and the piece of ice from his heart. 2 miles from here, the Snow Queen's garden begins. You must carry the little girl there and leave her by the large bush which stands in the snow covered with red berries. Don't stay there, but come back here as quick as you can. The Finland woman lifted Gerda upon the reindeer, and he ran away with her as quickly as he could. "Oh, I forgot to take my boots and my mittens," cried Gerda as soon as she felt the biting cold. But the reindeer could not stop, so he ran until they reached the bush with the red berries. He put Gerda down and then kissed her. Big tears came in his eyes. Then he left her and ran back. Poor Gerda stood there without boots, without mittens, in the middle of cold, ice-covered Finland. She ran forward when a whole legion of snowflakes came around her. They didn't fall from the sky, they ran along the ground, and nearly they came to her. The larger they became, they were alive, and they were the guards of the Snow Queen. Little Gerda began to say a prayer, and a cold was so great that she could see steam coming out of her mouth. The steam increased as she continued the prayer till it took the shape of little angels who grew large at the moment they touched the ground. Their number increased more and more, and by the time Gerda finished her prayers, a whole legion of angels with spears stood around her. They killed the terrible snowflakes with their spears, and little Gerda could go forward with safety. The angels stroked her hands and feet so that she felt the cold less, and she ran to the Snow Queen's palace. Story number 8. But now she must see what little Kay is doing. To tell the truth, he didn't think of Gerda and couldn't suppose that she was standing in front of the palace. The walls of the palace were formed of snow, and its windows and doors of the winds. There were more than 100 rooms in it, and they were so large and empty, so icy cold and sparkling. The flame of the northern lights could be seen from every part of the palace. In the middle of its empty hall of snow was frozen lake, and in the center of this lake sat the Snow Queen when she was at home. Little Kay was quite blue, almost black with cold, but he didn't feel it, for the Snow Queen kissed him, and his heart was already a piece of ice. He was moving some pieces of ice and putting them together in all kinds of positions, as if he wanted to make something out of him, as we try to form various pictures in the puzzle. He composed many different words, but there was no word he could not form, though he wished it very much. It was word eternity. The Snow Queen said to him, "When you form the sword, you will overcome my power and become your own master." But Kay could not do it. "Now I must hurry to a warmer country," said the Snow Queen, and she flew away, leaving little Kay quite alone in the great hall. And just at this time Gerda came through the great door of the palace. She went on till she came to the large empty hall and saw Kay. She ran to him and threw his arms round his neck and cried out, "Kay, dear Kay, I have found you at last." But he sat quite still, as if frozen. Little Gerda began to cry, and her hot tears fell on his breast and inside to his heart. Her tears melted a piece of ice which was there. Then he looked at him and began to sing the song that they often sang together, and Kay burst into tears. And he wept so that the bead of the magic glass swam out of his eye. Then he recognized Gerda and cried out joyfully, "Gerda, dear Gerda, there were you all this time, and where was I?" And he looked around and said, "How cold it is, and how large and empty it all looks." And they began to dance, and when they were tired and lay down, the pieces of ice formed themselves into the letters of the word eternity, which the Snow Queen told Kay to form before he could overcome her power. Then they took each other by the hands and went out from the great palace of ice. When they arrived to the bush with the red berries, they stood the reindeer waiting for them. He brought a young reindeer with him, and the little drank her warm milk and kissed her on the mouth. The reindeers carried Kay and Gerda first to the fine land woman, where they warmed themselves in the hot room, and then to the Lapland woman, who made some new clothes for them. The reindeers carried them to the borders of Lapland and said, "Farewell." Suddenly the birds began to sing, and the forest was full of green leaves, and out of the forest came a beautiful horse with Gerda remembered, because it was the horse which drew the gold coach. A young girl with a red cap on her head and pistols in her belt was riding it. It was a little robot girl. The girls were very glad to see each other. "You must be fine fellow," the robot girl said to Kay, "if Gerda went to the end of the world to find you." Then Gerda and Kay told her the end of the story, snip, snap, snare, and "It's all right at last," said the little robot girl, and she rode away into the white world, and Gerda and Kay went hand in hand towards home. When they came to the town, it was already spring, and everywhere there were beautiful flowers. They went upstairs into their grandmother's room, where all looked as before, but when they passed through the door into the room, they realized that they were both grown up, and then Kay and Gerda sat down on the chairs and held each other by the lantern. The cold empty palace of the Snow Queen vanished from their memory like a bad dream.